Bom dia a todas e a todos. Meu nome é Bruno Brandão, sou diretor executivo da Transparência Internacional Brasil. E eu gostaria de, em primeiro lugar, agradecer à Fundação Fernando Henrique Cardoso pela parceria na co-realização do evento de hoje, ao Sérgio Fausto, diretor, e toda a equipe da Fundação. Queria agradecer também à equipe da Transparência Internacional pela preparação e empenho na organização do evento, e especialmente minha colega Maíra Martini, do Secretariado da Transparência Internacional em Berlim, que mediará o debate de hoje. E agradeço especialmente ao público que nos acompanha, nos prestigia no debate de hoje. O trabalho mais conhecido hoje da Transparência Internacional é o nosso Índice de Percepção da Corrupção. Ele é hoje o principal medidor desse fenômeno da corrupção no mundo, cobrindo mais de 180 países e territórios e publicado regularmente há mais de 2 décadas. E os resultados do IPC, eles mostram claramente uma correlação entre o nível de desenvolvimento institucional dos países e a capacidade de controle da corrupção em seus territórios. E é por essa razão que a representação gráfica do IPC é aquele famoso mapa de calor em que o hemisfério norte está uma mancha amarela e o sul global uma mancha avermelhada, demonstrando um nível mais alto de percepção da corrupção. Mas é muito importante também compreender, observar e endereçar a questão da atuação dos agentes econômicos da parte amarela do globo quando operam na parte vermelha no sul global. É sabido que, historicamente, esses países conseguiram avançar no controle da corrupção, os países do norte, no controle da corrupção em seus territórios, mas suas empresas, seus executivos continuavam atuando de maneira corrupta quando faziam negócios em países em desenvolvimento, onde havia um ambiente de maior corrupção. E essa atuação ambígua, inconsistente com as práticas domésticas e internacional, geravam problemas graves e ainda geram problemas gravíssimos aos países mais pobres, desafios ao desenvolvimento desses países, principalmente agravando desigualdades. Mas isso também sempre foi ruim para os negócios, intoxicava, deteriorava o ambiente de negócios nesses mercados e, principalmente, distorcia as condições de competitividade. A corrupção sempre foi um grande problema para um ambiente de negócios, uma competitividade a partir da qualidade do trabalho, dos serviços prestados. E é por essa razão que o mundo, a partir da década de 70, começou a desenvolver um grande sistema internacional anticorrupção. Primeiro, a partir das convenções internacionais, as que nos afetam diretamente, que o Brasil é parte, 3 delas, a principal. A primeira delas foi a da Organização dos Estados Americanos, da OEA, foi a primeira delas, o Brasil se tornou parte. Depois, a Convenção da ONU, a chamada UNCAC, e a mais específica de todas elas, contra o suborno transnacional, que é a Convenção da OCDE. E, por ser tão específica, também uma capacidade também mais efetiva de tornar esses compromissos realidade. E também, no nível nacional, houve um avanço das legislações dos países para criminalizar a prática do suborno transnacional. A legislação pioneira foi a dos Estados Unidos, o conhecido Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, mas hoje também uma mais recente legislação que já se tornou uma referência, uma legislação moderna, é o UK Bribery Act, do Reino Unido, que foi sancionada em 2010. E o Brasil também tipificou a corrupção transnacional numa lei específica em 2013, que é a Lei Anticorrupção brasileira. E o Brasil é parte desse sistema internacional, ele tem compromissos assumidos nessas 3 convenções, tem uma legislação adotada nesse sentido, e o próximo ano será crítico para a avaliação do cumprimento dessas obrigações por parte do Brasil. Nós passaremos por 3 processos regulares oficiais de revisão. O primeiro deles, o da ONU, nós passaremos pela 4ª fase de revisão da Convenção da ONU, passaremos também pela avaliação da Convenção da OCDE e uma terceira avaliação do GAFI, do Grupo de Ação Financeira Internacional. Então, 2022 será um ano crítico para a avaliação da capacidade do Brasil de combater a corrupção perante os olhos do mundo. E nós sabemos que os retrocessos recentes do país trazem preocupações que podem agravar o isolamento, a tendência de isolamento do país no contexto internacional. Bom, esse é o objetivo do debate de hoje, é compreender esse sistema internacional anticorrupção, suas tendências mais recentes, as consequências do cumprimento e descumprimento dessas obrigações, e por isso convidamos dois grandes especialistas internacionais, um representando a OCDE, o outro uma agência referência no combate à corrupção em nível doméstico, que é o UK Serious Fraud Office, né, do Reino Unido, e são grandes especialistas nessa temática, e descobrimos também que são especialistas também em rugby e futebol. E aí o nosso parceiro Sérgio pode contar um pouco mais dessa curiosidade, a quem eu passo a palavra agora, agradecendo muito novamente a parceria, a Transparência Internacional e a Fundação Fernando Henrique Cardoso nesse debate. Muito obrigado.
Now I'll turn to English to present Drago, Paul, and Mayara very briefly. First of all, thank you so much for your generous time, Paul, Drago, and Mayra. And before I go into some of the details of your stellar CVs, one thing that I think is worth highlighting is the fact that your own biographies reflect this phenomenon that we've been witnessing in the last decades, which is the shaping of an international system to curb corruption, right? Both of you have started at your respective countries, right? Drago in Slovenia, Paul as a detective in London, first as a police officer, first as a detective, and then an expert on economic crimes within the realm of the UK. And you, Drago, as the chair of the Commission Prevention of Corruption in Slovenia in 2004. By the way, the year when Slovenia joined the European Union. Then both of you sort of climbed the institutional ladder, and Drago became the chair of the Europe's group of states against corruption, and now he's the chair of the working group on bribery in international business transactions in OCDE, which all of you know is a multilateral organization based in Paris. And Paul did somewhat follow pretty much the same trajectory in a way, because you started as a police officer in London, then now you have joined the SFO, which is part of the criminal justice system in the UK, but you're not only focused in the UK, but you're focused on bribery by companies and in UK individuals abroad. So sort of careers that start at the country level and that go up to the global level. So I think that sets the context of our conversation today. And Mayra is also part of the story because you were Brazilian, but you're based in Berlin. You've been abroad for quite a long time. You have a global perspective on this subject. You are a lawyer. You have a master's in public policy from the Hardy School of Government in Berlin, and you are a research and policy expert with the Transparency International Secretariat in Berlin. So I think I'm now going to take the back seat because you guys, you know this stuff, and I'm just not the right guy to conduct this conversation. So I'm handing it to you, Mayra, and you please, you run the show.
Good morning, everyone in Brazil. Good afternoon if you're seeing us from somewhere else. It's really a pleasure to to be here today. Thanks a lot for the invitation to Transparência Internacional Brasil, to the Fundação Fernando Henrique Cardoso, and to our panelists to be here. So before we start really a conversation, I wanted to give the floor to Drago for his opening remarks. Let's hear from him, and then we're going to hear from Paul. And then we have a bit of a debate until we open the floor and take your questions as well. So Drago, really a pleasure to see you again, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Maya. Well, the pleasure is all mine, and I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me. You know, I always like to take part in discussions on Brazil or from Brazil, because they always end in a very interesting way. So for those of your, let's say, participants who don't know what the OECD Working Group on Bribery is doing, is basically we are monitoring how 44 of our member states are enforcing the OECD Anti-Bribery Convention, which is quite narrow in scope, since it is criminalizing only the active bribery of foreign public officials. So what we do is we're not interfering so much with the domestic bribery cases or domestic corruption. We are only interested in international corruption. But of course, since countries usually do not have two different sets of legal rules in place, one for domestic corruption and the second one for international one, everything what we do usually also influences the, let's say, the fight against domestic corruption in our countries. As I said, we have 44 member states. The OECD has 36, which means that 8 of our members are not yet members of the OECD. And there is no other way to get to the OECD but to get there also through our working group on bribery. Why I say also? Because there are around 30 similar working parties at the OECD. And when countries trying to join the OECD, they have to get the green light from all of them. But you know, we are being famous by the fact that we are the most rigid group by giving the green light. So our process is not an automatic one. Our member states really do very carefully assess the readiness of the country to fight corruption before they give the country the green light to join the OECD. We had cases in the past, in the last years, when simply countries did not get the green light, which means in practical terms, they had to wait until 1 year more, because the decision who will join the OECD is only made once in a year by the Council of the OECD, which is composed of the ambassadors of the OECD member countries. We assess countries, we produce reports with recommendations, and we follow up on the implementation of our recommendations. And we are very strict in doing that, so strict that, and Mara, I'm sure you know that the Transparency International does the gold standard of monitoring, because we really do take care of our follow-up. And normally countries have to come back in 2 years to report on the implementation of recommendations. And if we are not satisfied, or even if we think that some recommendations are extremely urgent, we ask countries to come back again or to come back to us earlier than in 2 years. And of course, we also have a set of measures at our disposal to apply it against countries which do not comply with our recommendations. This set of measures has been expanded in 2018. Until 2018, all the measures were based on naming and shaming. But we realized that, of course, there are countries which are extremely sensitive when they're being exposed in the international arena as being non-compliant with recommendations. But there are also countries which simply do not care. So we said, well, we already in 2018, we had some problematic countries in the pipeline. So we knew that the day will come when we will have to reach out to some stronger measures. And unfortunately, it looks as this will happen quite soon. And those stronger measures will not only be naming and shaming, some of them also carry economic consequences. Because unfortunately, it seems that countries, otherwise, they do not, well, they simply do not care. We even have, let's say, countries in the group which and they are original members of the group, which means that they are with us from the beginning, and they still did not manage to transpose the requirements of the convention into their national legislation after so many years. And the convention entered into force in 1999. So it's 21 years now, 22 years now. And there are still countries which did manage to transpose this, let's say, the provisions of the convention into the national legislation. Of course, this is really worrisome. Exactly the same as the fact that we have roughly half of the countries in the group which have not managed to deal with more than one, maybe two cases of international bribery until now. In most cases, the number is zero, which means that countries and we are, don't forget, OECD is the club of the rich. We have countries which are really important economically in the world. And, having such countries in the group which are not able to identify and later on investigate one single case of international corruption, of course, causes a lot of problems for us. So we are trying to tighten the grip, not only because we really want to be very, let's say, strict on when we will be making decisions on admitting countries to the OECD, but also for our own sake. See, there's no point to have 44 members in the group if half of them are not doing what is expected of them, which is enforcing the convention. I have to say that in the upper groups, we are split according to the activity, we split our members in 4 groups. And the best group is the group with the most active enforcement. Let's say United Kingdom is in that group I mentioned just because Paul is with us. Usually we have the traditional suspects there, but of course countries are changing. Sometimes they are in group 1 and 2. There are, let's say, changes between groups 2 and 3. And we see that some countries are really improving in the last years. I will not say it only because of our interventions, but also due to our interventions. There are always some, let's say, it must be, let's say, a combination of different reasons why countries suddenly decide to move forward with the enforcement of the OECD Anti-Bribery Convention. Currently, as I said, it looks so that we will soon have to apply some of our strongest measures, carrying also economic consequences, and hopefully this will work. That hopefully this will be, let's say, tool strong enough, convincing our member states that they really have to do something to comply with our recommendations. We are also doing something else, which is we will soon publish, it might happen in December already, a dashboard where on the first glance, everybody will be able to see how countries are implementing our recommendations for, let's say, from day one. So this will give everyone quite, let's say, easy to understand picture how is which country doing the thing. What we also do, and then I will stop with describing the work of the working group on bribery. Now, the convention itself entered into force in 1999, as I said already. In 2009, our predecessor drafted the legal document, which is called Recommendation for Further Fighting Foreign Bribery, which is basically a complementary legal instrument to the convention. And 4 years ago, we started to review that document, and hopefully, if everything will go according to the plan, on the 9th of December, it means the International Anti-Corruption Day this year, we will launch the second version of the 2009 recommendation. And of course, we used opportunity. We did not only deepen the provisions of the recommendations from 2009, we also introduced some new topics in it, let's say, such as whistleblower protection, non-trial resolutions, and so on, data protection too. So this will be an interesting combination. I have to say already that I just hope that not too many people will be too disappointed when they will read the text of the recommendation, because you should not forget this is the text which has been heavily negotiated for many years among 44 member states. So this is the minimum agreement of all the countries that they will follow those standards. which is a big thing because it is not just a theoretical promise. All our countries know that they will have to fulfill those standards in our evaluation rounds. So it is not just, let's say, an NP pledge that they will do it. They know they will have to do it. Of course, let's say, I would wish myself that some parts of those recommendations would be written differently, or we would have more in it. But bottom line, I think the new text recommendation will represent a significant step forward. And just to end with the short, let's say, working in the OECD Working Group Library, but also in other fora, I would just like to mention two problems which we are facing right now in the international world of corruption. Now, you would expect that the first problem which I would mention would be COVID-19 crisis, but this comes second. What I see as the biggest problem and the most serious problem now on the global anti-corruption front is the problem of growing nationalisms. We have countries in the world which are not so interested anymore, if I put it politely and mildly, in the global efforts in the fight against corruption. They're turning more back to their national solutions, back to their national sovereignty, claiming that no one from outside will tell them how they will fight corruption. And analyzing those countries, there's a clear, let's say, you can see a clear parallel between countries where have very strong political leaders in place. Some call them autocratic leaders, and the situation which I just described, that they're not so much interested in fulfilling international, if you want, global standards in the fight against corruption. But what also came out of the research is that exactly in those countries, the level of corruption is increasing. So we have countries with strong leaders not being interested so much in the global efforts against corruption, and the level of corruption in their countries is increasing, which basically means for me personally, and I have to say, no, today I'm appearing here in my personal capacity, not and what I say, it's not the official positions of the working group, but for me that means that the statements of those political leaders who are saying that nobody will tell us what to do to fight corruption if it's not from our country, are basically window dressing or cover up for their deteriorating situation in the area of corruption in their own countries. Sometimes they themselves, they do take part in that corruption, but that depends, varies from country to country. But what is more important is that countries where it is obvious that do not want to follow these global standards in the fight against corruption are having more and more domestic corruption problems. The second problem, obviously, COVID-19 pandemic. Now, there are two magic words when the pandemic started. The first one was easier, the second one was faster. And both referred to the purchase of medical equipment and personal protective equipment. And of course, the tendency of the governments to protect their citizens' lives and health is normal. But we see, and we still, we saw and we still see in so many countries of the world that this has been heavily misused. Those two words, easy and fast, have been misused, let's say, for gaining a lot of private wealth by using the procurement procedures which were made easier, more simple, with the simple goal to, let's say, to purchase the needed equipment as soon as possible and to deliver it to the citizens in need. There are many criteria which show us clearly that situation in many countries in the area of corruption, because of COVID-19, has deteriorated. Also because of the fact, because law enforcement agencies were overwhelmed with other activities, which is normal again. Now, the main basic task of all law enforcement agencies around the world is to protect their citizens. And COVID-19 was a threat which required engagement of all enforcement agencies around the world. And again, this was heavily misused by some individuals in some countries, in the sense that they have misused the situation where they have dealt with much more flexible rules on procurement, combined with the lack of monitoring or lack of control, which was in place before the COVID-19 started. This was only the first part. Now, the second part also comes because countries are applying a lot of measures to assist their companies, families, and also individuals to overcome economically the crisis which appeared during the COVID-19. And a lot of money is spent here. Let's say European Union has developed a program which is worth several hundreds of billions of euros, which should be then shared with all EU member states. And you can be absolutely sure that countries will simply, some individuals in those countries will simply misuse the opportunity again and grab part of this cake. We even have countries, let's say one of them is my own country, which does not want to accept the European money because it is heavily conditioned with strict monitoring. Of course, they don't say that. They say, well, we will take the money from the money market because it's cheaper than the one we are getting from Brussels. Of course, which is not the case, but this is just an excuse. So we will all have to be very, very careful. Otherwise, the pandemic will not only have health, economic, and social consequences, but it will also have grave consequences in the area of corruption. And I will stop here and I hope there will be many interesting questions afterwards.
I already have a list of questions to follow up, and I already see there are some questions as well coming in the chat and the Q&A. So if anybody else have questions, please just post. But before we move to that part, let's hear from Paul. Paul, over to you, and then we can continue with the discussion.
Hi. First of all, I'd like to say thank you very much for the invite to participate today. Firstly, let's introduce myself. As Sergio kindly pointed out, I started life as a police officer, detective, investigating economic crime for 10 years. And then my last 10 years in the police, investigating foreign bribery. Then 2017, I'd moved to the Serious Fraud Office. And I'm now a case controller. I run the fraud and bribery cases here. But unusually here, I'm not a lawyer. So the reason of that preamble, when any legal type questions come later, you'll excuse me if I'm glancing at some notes helpfully provided by our legal team. So anyway, so that's enough about me. I work at the SFO, which is unique amongst the UK's criminal law enforcement agencies in that it both investigates and prosecutes. There's no other agency in the UK that has that dual function. And it was established specifically in 1987 following a number of failed fraud prosecutions. A guy called Lord Roskell, who came up with a number of recommendations, and basically they were that serious and complex fraud, which is extended now to include serious and complex bribery and corruption, shouldn't just be investigated by police alone. It should be a multidisciplinary office. So basically we have investigators, accountants, lawyers, analysts, everyone working together. I, as a case controller, I investigate, run the investigation side, and I have a counterpart prosecutor who runs the prosecution side, but we work hand in hand. So we don't have that disparate situation where I might be investigating something without realizing the legal consequences. So it's a really joined up approach. So we hopefully get it right from the start. We've got about 100 staff in total. We're in central London, as well as our operational divisions. We also have specialist intelligence, proceeds of crime, might mention later when we talk about victims, and international assistance, which is key to what we do, as very little of the work we do here is solely UK based. As I say, the international assistant is dedicated to executing the mutual legal assistance requests, the MLATs as they're called, and if they meet the criteria for serious and complex fraud, they're passed for us to deal with. But to point out, we do have a central authority, the UK Central Authority, who actually deals with those. So you can't send anything direct to us. It has to go through the UK Central Authority first. And again, we have a lengthy relationship, close cooperation with Brazil. We have our bilateral mutual legal assistance treaty, and you know, we regularly work together, as on the Petrobras case, which I'll come to later. We're an independent organisation. We're superintended by the Attorney General, but we're independent of the government, and that independence is really key to our operational performance. We work alongside other domestic law enforcement agencies, including the National Crime Agency, which is kind of our version of the FBI. So whilst we have our 48 different police forces around the country, the National Crime Agency deals with the most serious and coordinates the national and international police effort. So the SFO is part of an international network of law enforcement agencies, which work together across global jurisdictions, and we do have some excellent examples of success when this global community assists one another. The UK is currently undergoing a follow-up to our OECD Phase 4 review, which was conducted in 2017. Apparently, we received a positive evaluation from the working group, thank you, Trago, examiners, who issued a number of recommendations. The UK and the SFO welcome these recommendations, and these reviews enable us to continuously improve our own anti-bribery systems and encourage partner countries to raise their standards too. We like to think the UK is one of the major enforcers among the working group countries. Our Bribery Act of 2010, which actually came into force in 2011, replacing very dated legislation going back to 1896 and 1906 and 1916 as well, coincidentally following wars. Apparently wars were when corruption became noticed, and those following those wars were when we brought in legislation which was very antiquated. So in 2011 we upgraded our legislation and introduced a very interesting bit of legislation, which is Section 7 of the Bribery Act, which took a new approach to corporate criminal liability, which made legal persons criminally liable for failing to prevent bribery. So the burden of proof moved away from the prosecution if the bribery had taken place, and it would be for that body to prove they had adequate bribery procedures in place to defend that. So switching that burden of proof certainly made our life easier, and we've had a number of successful prosecutions using that legislation. And also in February 2014, we instigated another piece of legislation as part of our Crime and Courts Act, which means that designated prosecutors, which includes my director here at the SFO, can invite legal persons, companies, to negotiate non-trial resolution in the UK, known as a DPA, the Deferred Prosecution Agreement. This is an alternative for prosecution. So it's only available for economic crimes, including corruption offences, and it can be used retrospectively. So if the behaviour predates the legislation, that's not a bar to having this civil resolution. So I'll go through some of our successes. The Bribery Act has underpinned some of our high-profile non-trial resolutions, such as Rolls-Royce in 2017, where the financial penalty in the UK was over 671 million, which is our highest ever UK criminal enforcement, which included $170 million to the US and $25 million to Brazil, apparently via a leniency agreement with the, excuse my pronunciation, Ministério Público Federal. So in 2020, more recently, Airbus agreed to another DPA that was just under 984 million euros, plus our costs of 7 million euros. And again, it's international as part of a global settlement of 3.6 billion, which Airbus agreed to making payments of 2 billion to the French Parquet National Financier. And just over 525 euros to US authorities for separate bribery offences, which were covered by their respective jurisdictions. We move on to more recent, July 2021, Amec Foster Wheeler, which was my case when I first moved to the SFO, which has recently settled a financial penalty in relation to the use of corrupt agents in the oil and gas sector. And part of that agreement, Amec Foster Wheeler are paying 103 million in the UK as part of a $177 million US settlement with the UK, US and Brazilian authorities. The other notable successes I'm going to mention are January this year, the former global head of sales at Petrofac was pleaded guilty to his role in offering and making corrupt payments to agents to influence the award of engineering, procurement and construction contracts worth approximately $3.5 billion, and was recently sentenced to 2 years imprisonment, which was suspended for 18 months. And this was for 14 counts of bribery. And the company itself, Petrofac, pleaded guilty to 7 counts of failing to prevent bribery in October 2021, so just a month or so ago. And the financial penalty ordered there is in excess of £67 million. Further in February this year, we had the former senior sales manager of SBM Offshore was convicted of conspiracy to give corrupt payments in relation to $1.7 billion $1.7 billion contract, and was sentenced to 3.5 years imprisonment. April this year, we've got GPT, Special Project Management Limited, pleaded guilty to corruption in relation to contracts awarded to it and has paid confiscation, fine, and costs totaling over £30 million. And 3 individuals are also been charged with bribery offences in relation to this matter, and those cases are ongoing. So many of these cases we've laid charges, there are aspects of the case that wouldn't have progressed without strong international corruption and partnership. We've developed strong relationships both at strategic and operational level, and engagement in multinational international forums such as the OECD Working Group on Bribery, the WGB's annual informal meeting of law enforcement officials, focusing on practical challenges, joint working and sharing best practice have been key to building those relationships. Pre-pandemic, the SFO also regularly delivered training on bribery issues on behalf of the UK government, the OECD and UNCAC. And as we slowly emerge from the pandemic, I expect we can resume that role internationally, as we find this helps us both spread good practice and the big part, developing closer working relationships with overseas investigators and prosecutors, which anyone who's worked in the field know that is absolutely key and essential to any successful international investigation. I just point out, not everyone will know, the UK is made up of 4 countries. Each have their separate legal jurisdictions. Well, England and Wales are joined up, that's one. Scotland and Northern Ireland had their own systems. And they are considered separate jurisdictions. So it is our arena we work in is quite complicated. And also within England and Wales, the SFO is not the only law enforcement agency with the remit to investigate foreign bribery. We've got the National Crime Agency has their International Corruption Unit, which was formed in 2017, which used to be at the City of London Police, where I worked as the Overseas Anti-Corruption Unit. That responsibility moved to the NCA in 2017, and they now carry the baton. And sorry, I've lost my place. Right, and I'd just like to finish off saying that recommendations made by the Working Group on Bribery have helped to increase political awareness of tackling foreign bribery, have driven activity in the UK and provided a basis for discussions with enforcement partners. We have now, following our phase 4 review, introduced improved mechanisms for information sharing and coordination. We have a memorandum of understanding between all the relevant authorities, which states each authority's remit and interests. It sets out the mechanisms for coordination, which include regular meetings, for clearing and deconfliction, and considering new allegations, which are added to the working group's matrix of foreign bribery allegations. The SFO is working with the UK's tax authority to increase detection of international bribery and corruption in the work of their staff. And finally, I just hope from what I've said here, you can see the benefits of international cooperation, and also having the critical friend, Drago, review and evaluate your work just highlights areas for improvement and means we're moving forward and not just patting ourselves on the back saying what a great job we're doing. So that's my opening remarks. So thank you very much.
You both touch on many important things that we can discuss a little bit more now. But first I wanted to connect something that Drago was mentioning with something that Bruno mentioned in the beginning. So Drago was talking a little bit more about the risks we are facing now, basically that at the global level, we have some countries turning their backs to multilateralism, to solutions at the global level, and how we deal with corruption. And at the same time, we see corruption much more transnational. We have been talking here about foreign bribery, but there is another element as well that we have been seeing, and is very clear with the recent revelations of the Panama Papers, of the role that many of these countries that Bruno said are there at the top of our corruption perceptions index, the role that they play in enabling a lot of the corruption that is going on, either because they are allowing anonymous companies to be formed, or they are receiving dirty money that then is invested in real estate and in buying luxury goods and so on within their borders. But I think another element that is crucial for us to discuss here is that the same mechanisms there are also being used for those authoritarian states, for them to remain in power, for them to make sure that they have control over their state budgets and so on, but also in countries that we see now are seeing a democracy is in decline, no? And I think that's a discussion that is really relevant in Brazil and is really relevant in other young democracies as well, where we see the anti-corruption agenda being really, it's high on the agenda, exactly, but the actions you see are not actually matching the expectations. So Paul mentioned that one of the things underpinning their success is the independence of their office, no? And that's certainly something very important if we want to progress in the fight against corruption, and if we want to ensure that there is actual enforcement and so on. In Brazil, I think there is a growing concern globally of the setbacks that are happening in the legal framework of the country, in the institutional framework of the country. There are also discussions on independence of different institutions and so on. So Drago, as you said, you're talking in your personal capacity, wondering whether you could reflect a little bit how you think the setbacks that have been denounced in the media by organizations, including Transparência Brasil, that published a very comprehensive report recently. So how do you see these setbacks? How this could impact the economy, how this could impact the image of Brazil outside, and effectively a potential membership that I think it's what Brazil has been hoping to the OECD.
Well, I have to say that countries are always surprised when they learn how much we know about them, because we're really carefully following everything what is going on in countries. And that refers to, I refer to all 44 of our member states. So we know more or less very perfectly well what is going on in the countries. So I have to say that I'm concerned about Brazil. Brazil was a typical case of a highly corrupt country, which suddenly exploded in a positive sense, proving with Lava Jato task forces that Brazil is able and willing to cope even with the most difficult cases of corruption, domestic or international, doesn't matter. Brazil was showing that it is fully capable of doing things as we would expect any country which is really engaging against corruption. Now I have the impression that this enthusiasm or the pace is fading away slowly, simply because of because of many developments in the country which happened in the last year. This was also the reason, let's say, why we went for a high-level mission. I think it was in 2019. And we never organized a high-level mission in 1 month, as we did in the case of Brazil, because we really thought it's important for us to be there. Usually it takes roughly 1 year to organize such a high-level mission. We did it in 1 month for Brazil. We got back. I have to say that during the visit, things look a bit more positive. We came back with all positive, let's say, impressions. But then instead of seeing things being improving, things started to deteriorate even more. And since we were really spending a lot of time in the whole working group discussing Brazil, we decided to form a special subgroup. And this, let's say, this was first time after 2018 when we introduced such a measure, special subgroup for a country, which is composed of 4 of our member states, 3 or 4, which is in their task is exclusively to follow what is going on in Brazil and to propose, let's say, solutions to the whole working group. And this is now going every 3 months when we meet the plenary. We listen to the report of the subgroup and we decide on following measures. So currently we stick to the subgroup. The problem is that the number of problems in Brazil is not increasing, it is increasing. The last problem, let's say, which we realized in media was, let's say, the planned changes of the composition of the council, which would, of the prosecutorial council, which has an important role in Brazil. So this, of course, and combined with some other information about alleged, let's call them alleged corruption cases involving top politicians in your country, of course, affects the image of Brazil as a country which is able and willing to fight corruption significantly. If you would ask me this question 3 or 4 years ago, it would be very simple for me. You say Brazil is one of our best member states, proving that it can go from 0 to 100%. And that would be, let's say, my opinion regarding the activities of all institutions in Brazil. Now, positive opinions can only rest on efforts of some individuals, maybe 1 or 2 institutions. So it's not the whole Brazil now, which is really engaging in the fight against international corruption. Of course, as any, let's say, increase in corruption at the national level has devastating consequences also in the area of economy, this will also happen in Brazil. Maybe it will not be so visible because we should not forget you are also coping with the consequences of the pandemic. But for sure, let's say this increase of corruption will add its part to the worsening situation in the Brazil economy. Concerning the Brazil's accession to the OECD, and there I also saw a question asking, that somebody's asking me if it's correct that Brazil will be assessed next year. I would say, first of all, procedurally, I don't think this is possible. Now the procedures already in the working group take some time. And since the Council of the OECD is deciding on the accession of new member states every year in June, the end of May, beginning of June, which means it will be impossible for the OECD to process even the possible candidacy of the OECD. So we'll have to wait Brazil, and we will have to wait for some years more. Second, substantially, it's always in the hands of the working group members if they will give the green light to a country. But I have to say that I saw countries which less problems, which less important problems, which were receiving red light. But of course, I also saw countries which were having bigger problems than Brazil, and they received the green light. So it depends on our member states. But in the last years, I have to say that the criteria or let's say the strictness of our member states have increased, because we really do not want to get bad pupils in the class. We have plenty of them already. We don't need one more. But let's wait to see what will happen when Brazil will be assessed, because things might improve until then.
I think we could continue talking about that, but let's broaden a little bit and talk about, so we were discussing a little bit globally. I think there's a huge debate on the consequences also, of foreign bribery. You have money from that are affecting the resources of several states and also causing serious harms to the population in those states, including impacts on human rights. So I think there is a growing debate, which is also connected to the decline in democracy around corruption and human rights. But we feel that this angle is not completely covered or is really missing from international frameworks. We have seen state treasurers in supply side countries that end up keeping the fines and disgorgement of profits, while the state and people that were really affected by corruption are left out of the bargain. So I wanted to discuss a little bit more, how can we address the position of the victims of corruption, being it in domestic frameworks, but also international frameworks like the OECD Anti-Bribery Convention. You mentioned, Drago, the update of the recommendations. So I'm curious to hear whether this is something that is also being considered under the framework. And Paul, I wanted to hear from you, from the case you have been involved, the successes you mentioned, what considerations have been given also regarding victims of corruption. So Paul, we can start with you, and then we move on to Drago. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, when I first started working foreign bribery, it was always described as the victimless crime, in that, you know, there was no victims, for just ignoring the massive effect that some of these cases have on countries. One of the first cases I did was in Uganda with Ugandan officials, which was back in the police. It wasn't huge amounts of money by UK standards, but, you know, it was a large amount, and it was a real issue trying to work out how we could, you know, we'd restrain the money, we confiscated the money, but then do you just put that money back into the corrupt officials who we were taking it from in the first place? So that was something we worked with our international partners, DFID, the Department for International Development here in the UK, as was, and trying to work out processes that we could use to try and get that money back into, you know, the system in Uganda, rather than risking it going not where it will cause benefit. The recent case I mentioned with Petrobras and Amick Foster-Wheeler, again, Brazil was a victim there of the corruption, the bribery, and say part of that settlement, I've got the numbers here, over 200,000, not a huge amount, but 200,000, sorry, that's the wrong one. The 200,000 was, it was the same settlement, but that was with Nigeria. We give the money back to Nigeria. And the settlement recently with Brazil, with Petrobras, will involve funds being returned back. I mean, it is a really complicated, the actual restraining and confiscating the money is hard enough in the UK, but when we achieve that, it's that real problem of the trusted partner and how we can actually repatriate that money to the victims, to the victim country that's lost it.
When I was very young, a police detective and very young, let's say, anti-corruption fighter, I always thought that the basic goal of fighting corruption is to compensate the victims, or those who have been damaged by corruption. And I still think so. I do recognize that some countries have big practical problems, let's say, when they confiscate the assets or disgorge the companies, what to do with those assets. You know, as we just heard, I know for cases where the money or the assets were sent back just to be, let's say, grabbed by the corrupt guys once again. Maybe the faces were different, the names were different, but basically they did the same thing as the first time. So it's difficult to find the proper balance here and the proper solution here. I think that we will all need a bit more discussions, because there have to be ways how to compensate the victims without risking that the assets which have been, let's say, confiscated once already would return to the bad guys. And let's say most probably this will be the part which will not satisfy the, let's say, or everybody around the world when you will be reading the renewed text of the recommendation. There were, let's say, quite lengthy and intensive discussions about it. But as I said already, you know, this recommendation is the end result of negotiations of 44 members, 44 governments. What it was nice to see, and I was really happy to see, that there are many countries which are really willing to participate in further discussions. And this is something I think we will have to continue doing. So if personally I'm not satisfied with what we have in this particular topic in the reviewed recommendation, I'm optimistic about the future events in this area, because I'm sure that, let's say, by continued engagement, especially with countries which really have proven that they have a lot of interest in that area, and that they would like to really heavily to arrange everything possible to help the victims. I think in some years we will get to the let's say successful conclusion of those efforts. And let us not forget, when I said it for the first time in the work group on bribery, that was some 5-6 years ago. Well, we have to review the 2009 recommendation. I got the unanimous response of the group, no, we will not do it. When I said it for the third time after 2 years, it was yes. So my mandate is expiring at the end of next year, but I'm sure that my successor will be equally, let's say, persistent in pushing this issue. And as I said, I'm absolutely convinced that in some years we will have the solution for this problem too.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a difficult discussion. And often when you talk victims, you immediately think about state, but we're actually talking about people, no? There are people in those countries that are the ones who don't have access to the resource, that are actually being left completely behind. So I think we should, it should be the responsibility also of the international community to think of mechanisms that would allow those individuals in those countries to be fairly compensated. But I think connected to that, and I would take us to another topic, which I still think is connected. Paul mentioned a little bit the successes and the legal framework, the developments in the legal framework that allowed for non-trial resolutions. Drago, he also mentioned that that's something that is going to come out in December when the update of the document is published, of the recommendations. What we have seen in the past, I think there is a 2019 OECD report, if I'm not mistaken, that looks at the use of non-trial resolutions like settlements and plea agreements in foreign bribery case. And what they found is that about 80% of foreign bribery cases since the OECD Anti-Bribery Convention have been concluded through non-trial resolutions. There is definitely an increase we see in the use of such mechanisms in Brazil. That was one of the innovations, let's say, in the last years, and what brought to many prosecutions against also the passive side, thanks to those agreements with companies and so on. There is still the reasons for having those are many. We could be discussing them here, but simply I think they would save time, tremendous time and resources, no, that are needed to investigate and prosecute complex cases. But there are also challenges in using those. And I wanted to discuss a little bit more about the challenge and what can be done to oversee those. So we often talk about lack of transparency sometimes on how those are negotiated or oversight or other procedural challenges. But then there is also the issue of, are the sanctions dissuasive enough? And again, here, the role of making sure that we are taking into consideration the victims and so on. So yeah, would be glad to hear from you a little bit more about if you could reflect a bit on this and how some of this challenge related to using these mechanisms could be overcome or has been overcome in your jurisdiction, Paul. And Drago, your views as well.
Maida, may I pick back on that question, because there are a couple of interesting questions from the public, which I think we should add to the conversation here. Can I? Yeah, because it's associated with the question you just asked. It is a concern that is reflected in various questions here. One of them is from Alexandre Ribeiro Filho, which is about the proper following of the rule of law in efforts to investigate corruption. And it's a specific concern regarding Lava Jato. There is a growing perception here in Brazil that Lava Jato sort of went out of its way, sort of derailed in sort of abusing of plea bargain and other investigative tools that they had in their hands. And that was the root cause of the backlash that we are facing today, right? Can you comment on that? I mean, because I think there is a real concern that, okay, fighting corruption is good, but the way you do it might be counterproductive. And in that regard, you should take into consideration the specific legal contexts and political content, country contexts.
Okay, well, our position here in the UK, we've had civil settlements, deferred prosecution agreements in for a while now, but it's individuals who run those companies. You know, when you start an investigation, you know, we're investigating the individuals, the boards, you know, the key decision makers in those companies, you know, because if they have broken the law, then my role as ex-cop, a prosecuting investigator, those are the people that should be facing the consequences. Conversely, if things have moved on and the company has changed hands, why, you know, if we prosecute the company, that could end up with financial hardship to people who had nothing to do with it. They lose their jobs, the company goes out of business. So for me, it is a balancing act between making sure we investigate, you know, the real wrongdoers, senior people, not necessarily the you know, the lower level person who's just done it to try and keep his job, but the, you know, the decision makers. These things come from the top. You know, if you know, it's the tone from the top. It's the expression in the UK. You know, companies that are that fall foul of this, fall foul of bribery, corruption, you know, it's very seldomly outside the knowledge of those who run the company. So, yeah, so for me, it's that dual approach. Just maybe help on what the question that Sergio added in. Obviously, in the UK, all our deferred prosecution agreements are judicially reviewed. Senior judges review the whole process, the appropriateness of the sanctions, you know, and the appropriateness of whatever follow-up is going to come out of the particular settlement. So, you know, it's good that, you know, organisations like the SFO can do the work with the company and agree the resolution, or try to agree the proposed resolution. But I say it's always a very senior judge, at highest judges, who actually review that process and make sure everything's has been done correctly, appropriately, and that this is the appropriate sanction. They can always have the right to decline and recommend that we actually prosecute the company. So that's what we do in the UK.
Sorry, just one. Let me go a little further, Maida, in asking Paul whether when the SFO is conducting an investigation, a judge is following the investigation sort of in tandem with the SFO, or there's no, I mean, it's two parallel routes, and two, it's a sequence of, so that you investigate, and then afterwards the case is presented to a judge, and the judge takes a decision. Is how that works.
Yeah, it's sequential, as you say. So we do the investigation, negotiate with the company or what they all agree to, that what their wrongdoing was, and then we then present that to the judge, and the judge will then always question, challenge, send us back to do more work, and, you know, and make sure that they are happy with the particular set of resolution that we propose. And at the end of the day, it's the judge that actually decides on any penalties. There was a famous case where the SFO had provisionally agreed that beforehand, and the judge made it clear in uncertain terms that they are responsible for setting the appropriate penalties. But it's sequential. We do the investigation.
All right.
We are aware of the, let's say, some criticism which some international organizations, also domestic ones, plus individuals, have on the account of the NTRs, because they're saying, well, this is a system which enables companies or even individuals in those companies to get out of the problem easily. Just pay the fine and that's it. So I think this was possible because there were no standards in place yet for the NTRs. Now, hopefully from December there will be, and I can assure that the standards in this area are quite strict now. We need those standards also because of the fact which we realized during our research we were making, that in cases of the NTRs, there are less and less individuals from the companies which participate in NTRs, and they pay, let's say, sometimes hundreds of millions of euros or dollars of fines. Nothing happens to individuals. And as Paul has said, it's always the individual committing the crime. The company cannot commit the crime. The company is a virtual being. So we want both. We want natural and legal persons being held responsible. And even if it's NTRs, justice has to be done, and it has to be seen as being done. So this is on NTRs specific, on NTRs in general term. On Brazil specifically, on Lava Jato case, I don't think there was only the question on the NTRs. That's the impression which I got from the question, let's say in the chat box. Let's say Lava Jato was a really big exercise and a big fight against corruption cases in Brazil. And what happened afterwards, I can only characterize it with the words which everybody will understand. The empire strikes back. This is always the case. When you have a very effective anti-corruption institution or institutions, the empire, which is the corrupt guys, will always strike back. We have such a problem, let's say, in Romania, where almost similar thing happened. You know, in Romania, they had specialized anti-corruption prosecutors office, which at the beginning was not doing anything, and everybody was very happy with it, no problems. Then they started to produce, and there were some years when the most risky job in Romania was being minister, the prime minister, or the president, because almost all of them went to jail. The empire struck back, and the head of that prosecutor service was forced to leave. And there are many, let's say, criticism on the account of that office. So it looks to me that something similar is happening now to Brazil. I'm aware of the rumors which are appearing, let's say, concerning the actions of prosecutors and judges from Lava Jato task forces. Let's say, let me be very clear. I would expect that individuals who are fighting corruption, either in the role of police investigators, prosecutors, or judges, they will stick to the law and ethics 100%. This is an absolute must. There's no other way. I heard many criticism afterwards, let's say, going after some prosecutors, after some judges, particularly one judge in Brazil. But until now, for me, those are still the rumors. Let us wait to see, because I know there are some proceedings going on. Let us wait to see what will those proceedings show. Of course, I saw some of the communications between judges and prosecutors, which might be understood as not being exactly highly ethical, but I still don't think, or I don't know if this would be, those discussions would be an argument strong enough to say, well, the whole thing was crap, everything, the prosecutors, the judges were breaching the law, they were breaching or misusing their powers. For that, I'm afraid we'll have to wait for some more concrete facts.
Thank you. No, I think it's good to hear that there will be more clarity also and more guidance being published, because I do think that's an area that there shouldn't be things that are in the dark, and there should be a lot of transparency and accountability as well. And it's important that even if it is an agreement, that the facts are made public, and that people know what happened, how it happened, and what is being done as a resolution. And yeah, I fully agree that following also taking the responsibility of the individuals is crucial. It's not very common. We see many cases that you end up with the non-trial resolution and you don't go after the executives, or sometimes you don't go after the high-level ones, like Paul was saying. No, you would get someone inside of the company, but don't follow the decision-making, basically, the ones who were in power. Sergio, are there any other questions from the audience?
Yes, there's at least one that I think it's worth mentioning. It is from, can I ask it now? It's from Guilherme Donegar from the Inter-American Development Bank, and it's directed to Drago. I'm going to read it. Dear Drago, in a recent speech, you have mentioned that the OCDE is working on a revised version of the organization's recommendations for combating bribery, which would include positive incentives for multinationals to implement good compliance programs. Would you care to elaborate on how such system could be designed and any existing country experience in implementing a similar mechanism?
I never understood systems where companies were investing sometimes millions of dollars in building up very, let's say, expensive, but also usually also very effective compliance systems. And they were awarded for that only when something went wrong in those companies, because when the criminal proceedings started against the company, sometimes this was, let's say, a mitigating circumstance. Let's say there was also some countries where companies got off the hook completely because of those compliance systems. So then in the group we said, and of course we also listened to the representatives of the business sector, said, wait, if we have companies which are really engaging heavily in building up and maintaining those compliance systems, then of course, why wouldn't we reward them even before something goes wrong? And we, now in the revised recommendation, we are asking countries to consider the possibility to reward such companies, not only multinationals, but all companies in our member states in the ways, and we cited some examples. For example, that only companies which have effective compliance system in place would be eligible for participating in public procurement processes, or they will earn extra points in public procurement processes, or they would be the only ones eligible for receiving official development assistance, foreign export credits, and so on. So you see, basically, we are asking our countries to consider the possibility to reward companies economically, or we say with better chances to improve their economic situation if they have those systems in place, even before someone from the company will commit a criminal offense and they will start the criminal proceedings. We have, let's say, we have the case of Italy. I think it's the last one where this is already being, well, at least according to the law, is being dealt with. And I'm sure that many countries will follow very soon after the recommendation will be issued in December.
Maida, I have one last question to Paul. And it's not from the audience, it's from my head. But it's typical of Brazil and American countries, and that corruption is not, it's a business conducted jointly by businessmen, persons and politicians, right? What's the story? I mean, taking a historical perspective, does corruption penetrate the political system in the UK, or this is a turn page? Based on not on speculation, but on the cases you have focused on your work.
Based on my work, I've never had to deal with a domestic public corruption case. There was it was well reported. Some of our politicians came under scrutiny for making false claims and claiming for second houses and expenses they weren't entitled to. That was quite a few years ago now, before the pandemic, but that wasn't something I was involved in investigating, so I'm not really in a position to comment on that. Sorry.
Interesting. Yeah. Thank you, Paul. Maida, I think it's about to finish it, so back to you.
Yeah, no, just very quickly. Then there are no other questions from the audience. Then I understand.
Not that I know.
Okay, good. Yeah, so before we finish, just perhaps just one more consideration, because Paul, maybe you can tell us a little bit more. You mentioned, you emphasized a little bit the benefits of international cooperation and the relationships, of building relationships with other prosecutors and so on. And there is a relatively new initiative that is now based out of the UK, but involves other countries. That is the International Anti-Corruption Coordination Center, which, if you can tell us a little bit more, tell the audience how it works, and a little bit of the importance of this exchange with prosecutors and how this enables better investigation and enforcement of foreign bribery cases.
The history of this goes back to, I think, 2007, when, following an OECD inspection, my unit was set up in the City of London Police dealing with foreign bribery. And we soon realised that you've got to have really good operational relationships with all countries around the world. We set up initially a foreign bribery task force with us, the Americans, Canadians, and the Australians. That has still up and running, but that's extended now to the ICC, which is, so it's hosted out of the National Crime Agency. And it's basically just a communication tool, facilitation tool for getting evidence, information, contact between partner countries. You know, so anyone can send a request into any country if they're not a member of the ICC, and I'm not quite sure what the current membership is, but anyone can send in a request through them, and they will try and facilitate that international request elsewhere in the country through relationships that either UK or other members have. So it's just that communication tool. And if any of you have investigated bribery before, you'll know how really difficult it is, you know, and how crucial it is to have these relationships, you know, being able, even, you know, obviously we all have to go through the formal legal channels, but being able to pick up the phone, speak to a counterpart in somewhere else in the world, find out what their systems are, what their processes are, what the inhibitors are likely to be, means that when you do send your legal request, it'll be far more likely to be successful and will go quicker, because you've got that groundwork in place and you know what the pitfalls can be. And that's what this is about. It's about making sure those international requests are facilitated, are framed properly, dealt with as quickly as you can, and that way we get the evidence from where it is to where it needs to be, so that, as we say, hopefully the end result we all want is that the bad guys get locked up.
It's an important debate, no? And it has been a debate also in Brazil with the recent investigations on how you can do that, and do that in a way that respects due diligence, that you're not going through, like, you're following the legal procedures as you said. So it's good to hear your experience and how it has been used in the UK in the past. If there are no more questions, maybe I pass over. There are any other questions, Sergio, also from you?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Okay, so maybe I give you both the floor for some closing remarks. It has been really insightful. I think many of the things we discussed today are very relevant to discussions in the country, but also elsewhere. So yeah, over to you, Paul, if you want to start with some closing remarks, and then Drago.
Yeah, I think I'm just repeating what we just said. I mean, how international corruption, the key for me for investigating, which is obviously my bit, investigating and prosecuting foreign bribery, is that communication, cooperation between in country and from in the UK. Because if I'm investigating corruption, I need to have access to the tax people, the revenue, because these guys, there'll be a way to find, the evidence is always difficult, but there'll be a way, hopefully somewhere, where you could get a leg in and sort of insight into what they've been doing. So that international corruption is key. You can't ignore anything. If you guys are investigating anything with bribery, even the smallest little tip or bit of information, it's always worth following up, because evidence is so hard. It was the guy who helped draft our legislation, Roderick McCauley, used to describe bribery as the happy crime, because people are happy to pay the bribe and the recipients are happy to receive it. And they're even happier if no one outside those two know what's going on. So it's a devilishly difficult crime type to investigate. Never ignore anything. And if I give you one big tip when you're investigating a company, we always go to the compliance department, because that's the first place to start. Look at who the compliance department has sacked in the last year, because those are the ones you want to speak to, not necessarily the ones who are in post now.
Well, let me invite you already to participate in some of our meetings, because we just made the decision that we will give some training to new delegates in the group, and so what you just said would be extremely important for them too. So I hope you'll be part of the UK delegation quite soon. For the rest, as Paul has said, and as the group has said this year already, the enforcement is the key. So, and this is what we really put a lot of emphasis on it. Of course, it's important that countries do, let's say, transpose the provisions of the international conventions into their national legislation. Of course, it's important that countries have specialized anti-corruption institutions, but nothing is more important than to see those institutions functioning and investigating, prosecuting, and adjudicating corruption offenses. There are ups and downs in all countries when it comes to fighting corruption. Currently, Brazil, I would say, is not so much up as it used to be some years ago. But knowing so many, let's say, devoted professionals in the country, and hoping that also the politicians will understand soon that it does not make sense to adjust the whole system to their political or personal needs. It's not important, because it will only harm them, it will harm their countries. I'm sure that Brazil will be up soon again.
Thank you, Drago. I guess we have a lot of people fighting for that, and there to provide the support, the advice, and yeah. And we are from here also trying to put the pressure that we can. Sergio, any final words from your side?
Well, big thanks to both of them, and to Drago. Please, Drago, and come to Brazil. I would love to spend hours talking about football with you. Right? I spend a huge chunk of my leisure time watching football games. So I would love to know your opinion about the video assistant referee and the interpretation of the rules, penalties, and all that. So please make the time to come to Brazil. I would like to meet you in person, Paul, and come here too. It would be a pleasure. I'm a big fan of the Premier League. And thank you so much. Obrigado, Bruno. Obrigado, Maíra.
Obrigado, Bruno. Any final words from you?
Eu também queria agradecer especialmente a excelente exposição de ambos, nossos convidados, Paul Farley e Drago Cos, duas referências no trabalho anticorrupção, são verdadeiros professores dessa matéria, e agradeço também ao Sérgio e a Maíra por terem atuado como dois árbitros entre dois árbitros, porque nós não chegamos a comentar, mas o Drago Cos foi, por muitos anos, árbitro de futebol, e acabamos de saber também que Paul Farley foi árbitro de rugby. E nossos dois mediadores fizeram um excelente trabalho de arbitragem entre esses dois experientes árbitros, e a discussão acho que foi muito proveitosa para o nosso público também, e por isso eu agradeço a atenção de todos e espero estarmos juntos numa próxima ocasião. Muito obrigado.
All right. Take care.
Thank you so much, Drago, Paul, and everyone from joining us.
And Maíra, congrats for wonderful work you've done.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.